On Scotland's Atlantic coast, life is a fight for survival. On the weather side of Rhum, the southwest wind blows unchecked from the Atlantic, and we can watch in action now the forces which have eroded this island since the last ice melted 10,000 years ago. An ancient volcano heaved up the mountains of Rhum, which has three summits over 2,500 feet, Askival, Ainchval and Sgurn and Gillian. Here, wind and frost create a rock desert where little grows, though over 120 inches of rain fall in a year. Such an island never attracted seafaring men. Until the 16th century, it was probably little disturbed. Yet 150 years ago, over 400 people of the clans survived here. At Harris, the largest single settlement, the traces of their lazy bed cultivation still stretch across the hill. But only by overtaxing the land could men live by crofting, where they depended on their own resources to overwinter their small black cattle. At Kilmorey, these ruins have been deserted since 1828, when 400 men emigrated to Canada, Mackenzies, Macleans, Mackays and Macmillans. Murdo Matheson's family must have been one that stayed. In 1873, his children all died within a week from just one of the effects of isolation, a fatal lack of resistance to infection. When the inhabitants left, there was no mourning for their departure. The only flowers were those on the sands of Kilmorey Bay. And 8,000 sheep replaced them, and the island became once more nature's domain, silent, empty, and overexploited. Until the arrival in 1887 of the millionaire family from industrial Lancashire, the takeover of Rhum and its red deer trophies by the sporting laird and his lady. It was Sir George Bulloch, world traveller, art collector and friend of royalty, who decided to build on Rhum his dream home, Kinloch Castle, to be laid out with lawns, rose gardens and even heated turtle pools on the shores of Loch Scrisort. Red sandstone was specially imported from the Isle of Arran, 180 miles away, and the sumptuous design made each side of a hollow square as long as his famous yacht, the Rhum. Only the fact that the original plan wouldn't fit between two natural streams made him modify the length of the colonnades. So the Bulloch family made their mark on Rhum. Kinloch Castle, surely the ultimate status symbol, was built in the first few years of the 20th century. For a glittering decade before the Great War, the dream came true. The finest craftsmanship of Scottish workmen, the best furniture and fittings that money could buy, from solid oak panelling or silk wall hangings to the Steinway concert grand, all made life more elegant and sophisticated for Lady Monica. Among all the trappings of Edwardian splendour, many a house party must have waltzed the night away in the ballroom. For those taking tea in the drawing room, there would be as background music the brash, elaborate tones of the orchestrion. Only Queen Victoria had another like it, a mechanical organola which could bring the full orchestra, percussion included, to this remote corner of the Western Isles. Sir George saw himself as the sporting laird, able to live in Rhum, with of course the help of many servants, in the true style of a gentleman of means. The remoteness was to be no obstacle. The castle was installed not just with suitable furnishings, but with the first internal telephone system in Scotland, and with hydroelectricity from its own dam and generating station. There were the expected trappings of great collectors like lion-skin rugs, and even such luxuries as flowered porcelain. Perhaps the ultimate in luxury was to soak away the self-imposed hardships of a day's stalking on the hill in the most elaborate shower bath ever invented, a combination of spray, shower and douche designed to soothe the tired sportsman from every direction at once. Here was luxury doubly sumptuous for its contrast with the rugged backcloth of Rhum. The library, with its art treasures, seems strangely incongruous, an intrusion on the real life of Rhum, the island home of red deer and golden eagle. In late summer, when the heather is in blossom and the rowan berries shiver in the October winds, comes the climax of the red deer's year. The rut starts in late September, the young stags roaring their challenge. But the older beasts, dominant against all comers, as each holds his own group of hinds on the hill. George MacNaughton has 40 years' experience of deer stalking on Rhum. He spots a prize stag running off defeated by its rival high on the hill. In the days of the bullocks, this 10-pointer would have been a fine trophy. But George MacNaughton is no longer head stalker for a sporting estate. Now he sees this as a prime stag that will help to keep up the quality of the herd. Deliberately, he lets it go. He may hark back to the days when such a head would perhaps have been reserved as a shot for an important guest. But now he is senior warden for the Nature Conservancy's biggest island nature reserve, with a population of about 1,500 red deer. These animals, grazing now without competition from sheep, form one of the chief research projects on Rhum. Today, the stalker's quarry is probably a young stag, to be culled for purely scientific reasons, perhaps a marked individual, or one of a sample from a particular age group. Yet the skill and the technique are the same. The upwind stalk, the slow, silent approach, and the stealthy shot. Stalking by experts is a clean job, a quick death from a high-powered rifle. But it's still hard work. The stag must be grallocked on the hill, carted by pony to the larder, and there weighed, skinned and analysed as part of a scientific programme. For all the research on Rhum, accurate weather data is essential. Its hills create cloud and have almost 100% average humidity for months on end. Some rain falls on 2 days out of 3, and totals 87 inches a year, even down at the castle. In brief, Rhum is one of the wettest places in Scotland, resulting in large areas of peat bog and constant erosion by the runoff of rainwater. After the rain, the wind is the worst feature that Nature Conservancy's staff have to contend with. Working down at Gurdill in October is no picnic in the face of a force 9 southwest gale. The wind and sea have shaped and carved the Torridonian sandstones of the north end of Rhum into elaborate erosion patterns. In many ways, Rhum is a microcosm of the whole western seaboard of Scotland. Its ecology is based on the sea. The balance of nature here has salt on the scales. Seabirds thrive, kittiwakes and shags, and on a few cliff ledges the noisy guillemots and razorbills. All depend on the bountiful sea for their food, like the Atlantic grey seals, which come inshore to bask on the rocks. The gaudy oyster catcher's piping is the typical sound of the coastline, the cry of ownership. For all this environment belongs to a host of living creatures, a complex community into which man comparatively recently has intruded to change and modify the land to his own use. But long, long before we arrived on this scene, the insects were there. In the Bay of Harris on the west of Rhum, wild thyme carpets the ground, tenanted by colonies of ants. In summer, butterflies are everywhere, with names as entrancing as their gay colours. The dark green fritillary, the common blue, the six-spot burnet, the grayling, and the small pearl-bordered fritillary. But man's greatest impact on this colourful scene was his introduction of grazing animals. The famous Rhum ponies date from at least the 18th century, before the island was given over wholly to sheep farming in 1828. The ponies now number 1 stallion and about 20 mares. Traditionally saddle and pack animals, they are still used for carrying deer carcasses down from the hill. But they're too few to have a significant effect on the grazing, which, apart from about 100 wild goats, the red deer now have to themselves. When the Nature Conservancy took over Rhum as a national nature reserve in 1957, the grazing tenant gave up and sheep were not replaced. So Rhum, with its 26,000 acres, is the only large area in Scotland where red deer can be studied without competition from sheep. Deer calves are often born on the lower ground, usually in early June. For most of the year, the Red Deer Society is a matriarchy, the hinds in parties dominated by an older, more experienced beast. And Rhum is notorious for its insect pests. In the longer grass of the valley, the deer are driven crazy, especially by the clegs and the ticks. In the face of the summer insects, the deer move up to the high ground to escape. The hinds have their calves at foot. And with this annual increase, the population of red deer reaches about 1,500 animals. And many studies have been made of their numbers, feeding habits, age and social structure. For most of the year, the stags also keep in separate parties, in summer mostly on high ground. Some, fed with hay in the winter, are tame enough to be studied at close quarters and have been individually marked with ear tags for identification. 10 years' careful research has proved one vital fact, that 1/6 of the population can be culled each year without reducing the total numbers. And with the recent big increase in the value of venison as an export to Central Europe, this level of cropping is already being applied in many deer estates in Scotland. So research can pay in every sense. But how many grazing animals can the land support? This will always depend on the pasture, and Rhum, as a great outdoor laboratory, is a unique opportunity to study the effect of animals on the vegetation, or if you like, how much flesh and blood the land can safely produce. The first thing is to fence off small plots of land against the grazing deer. At regular intervals, the Conservancy staff visit these plots on what must be some of the worst roads in Scotland. Here they measure exactly the difference between the close-cropped turf outside the fence and the flush of ungrazed vegetation inside. Every plant species is recorded in a measured transect across the boundary fence to assess the nutrients available as pasture down to the tiniest mosses. On the west side of the island, some of the larger fence plantations, like this one at Kilmorey, are now 10 years old and have birch trees 25 feet high and a rich variety of trees and shrubs providing food and cover for wildlife. At once the ecology changes, the variety of nature is restored. Even the fence itself becomes an important feature as a songpost or perch for pipits, or for the handsome stonechat. Whinchats, with their prominent white eye stripe, and robins and other birds move in to feed on the richer insect life. At Harris, the bleak exposed landscape is softened and enriched by the new plantation. In the shelter of pines, broom and gorse, planted seedlings are now thriving, all native trees lost in the past due to burning and overgrazing, like oak and rowan and birch. This restoration of vegetation cover is the primary aim of the Nature Conservancy's plan of land management for Rhum, and is already being expanded to much wider areas. The first effect is dramatic. Willow warblers and other cover-seeking birds return to these oases on hillsides which man had turned into a wet desert fit only for sheep. Nature's variety is restored, but it can only be done by long-term planning in deer and livestock management, in reforestation, and by sheer hard work. There's a tree nursery at Kinloch Castle for many species of native Scottish trees, Scots pine and hazel, and also alder, birch, rowan, willow, bird cherry and oak. After all, it worked well enough when the Bullocks tried it 70 years ago, and when with the aid of 14 gardeners they planted the Kinloch woodlands in the first years of the century. Now they are some of the finest woods in the Hebrides. Here a completely new environment was created for man to enjoy, and a new habitat formed for such wild creatures as wood mice, which still flourish, and woodland birds and insects, and of course midges. This was the avenue designed by and for the rich to drive up in style to their castle, but now it demonstrates a new kind of richness, a restoration of the balance of nature, where insects abound and the birds that feed on them thrive, and at least a part of man's wilderness becomes a haven for wildlife. After all, it's only because of our destruction of their habitat that tree creepers are rare in most of the highlands and islands. Cock chaffinch and coaltit are common enough. And the tiny goldcrest is always there in the pine woods but seldom seen. Many insects have become established in the castle woods, like the buff-tip moth, fantastically patterned to resemble its birch twig resting place. Peter Wormel, Chief Warden of Rhum, has a collection of 220 species of butterflies and moths, some of them rare in the Hebrides. Some have established themselves here within the last 25 years, like the lovely speckled wood butterfly. So the Bullocks, for all their empire building, achieved something on their barren island after all. They proved that planning and good estate management can enrich the face of the land permanently, and the Nature Conservancy's plans for Rhum are based to some extent on their example. In many parts of northwest Scotland, and indeed of the world, man has grossly overexploited the land. Now, conservation of our resources has become a national necessity. The same methods we once misused to despoil the land must now be used to restore it, like burning, grazing and animal husbandry. The next stage on Rhum will be the reintroduction of Highland cattle to the glens. We must also use new tools such as fencing and this deep ploughing, for we need short-term results that can be understood, and these tools help us to telescope the slow timescale of nature. This replanting of 1,400 acres with natural woodland sets a pattern that can be applied to much of our West Highland landscape. In the much longer term, the lessons learned here should be applicable in any area with a similar climate. But it's not all hard work, and life can be very pleasant in the shelter of the castle woods, even if it's the warden's wife who has to look after their garden. After all, the basis of all research work is manpower, and the Nature Conservancy staff of 40 employees must have a reasonable social life and contact with the mainland. There are in fact 4 boats a week from Mallaig in the summer. For visitors, and 1,500 come to Rhum every year, Lough Screesort and the wildlife along its shoreline are an attractive and exciting welcome. But if you live there, you need more than birds and scenery. Many factors are essential for a happy working community. For instance, a home farm, a village hall, and a good school for the children. In the interests of research, visitors must accept some restrictions. They have the freedom only of the Lough Screesort area marked green on the map, but there are nature trails for their interest and some unique natural history experiences. Where else can you find, on mountain tops like Hallival and Askival, an underground city of remote oceanic birds, the Manx shearwaters? Here, 2,000 feet up in a wind-eroded desert of rock, are green areas of turf among the stones, strangely fertile from the droppings of tens of thousands of seabirds. A burrow is marked with a numbered peg, but by day there's little else to be seen. The birds are all underground. Even man is lost in this landscape. The warden has a research project up here with marked birds in numbered nests, where he can demonstrate to a visiting party of students a half-fledged chick, taken from the security of its nest tunnel, to which he returns it with care. The Manx shearwater is a plankton feeder, whose true home is in mid-ocean. This bird's mate may be hundreds of miles away feeding. Ringing has revealed their faithfulness to the same mate and the same burrow year after year, and their astonishing ability to home onto this remote mountain top. Possibly 50 to 60,000 pairs of shearwaters nest on the heights of Rhum in a unique situation far above their natural environment. Although they seem well able to look after themselves here, they are helpless on land and depend on the cover of darkness to reach their underground homes safe from the predatory gulls. So it is usually dusk before they gather over the water, waiting for the darkness to fall before they come to land and fill the night air with their mysterious wailing cries. But perhaps the strangest feature of all in Rhum is the memorial to man's ultimate frailty, the mausoleum, where the Bullocks, the proud family who made this island their little kingdom of Edwardian splendour, now lie buried in windswept Glen Harris. Nowhere is the lesson clearer that nature is not a commodity that we can manipulate for our own use, but a complex community to which we too belong, and about which we are only just beginning to learn the real truth.